This episode of The Boat Geeks is sponsored by The Boater's Guide, a free app for Pacific Northwest boaters. The Boater's Guide is adventure and information, right at your fingertips, right when you need it. Find your happy place with The Boater's Guide, a free download on your phone or tablet in the App Store and Google Play.
Today on The Boat Geeks, we have Master Chief Harley Matlock, officer in charge on the Osprey, the Coast Guard Cutter Osprey, which we've seen in Ludlow here a few times.
I think it was just out here on the buoy just 2 nights ago.
Yeah. As a kid, the kid in me, it's just an awesome looking ship.
Oh man. Yeah.
I love the Osprey. I love the lines and and the bridge. Something about the bridge just maybe it's because it looks military, whatever, and that's the boy in me.
It's tough looking.
It's tough looking.
It really is.
But what a vessel and what a guy Harley is.
Yeah, really interesting guy.
Career Coast Guard, knew he wanted to be in the Coast Guard immediately when he graduated high school. And he's just given a lot of years of service. We really appreciate our Coast Guard.
We do. They
save lives all the time. And it's just good to have them as a presence here in the Puget Sound. It was exciting having somebody from the Coast Guard.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so.
Great guy.
Absolutely agree. He's a local as well, lives here locally, has family. And it was just good to get the perspective of somebody that's in the Coast Guard and out there serving us every day on the waters and on our coast here. And like we mentioned during the podcast, hopefully someday we're going to be on one of those boats, getting some footage and seeing what it's like for these men and women that serve our country through the Coast Guard. So Harley Matlock, officer in charge of the Osprey, our next guest on the Boat Geeks.
From beautiful Port Townsend, Washington, a Victorian seaport on the Salish Sea, and recorded aboard the motor vessel Traveler, it's the Boat Geeks with Darren and Daeron.
We're the Boat Geeks, whatever floats your boat. We're the Boat Geeks, it's the boat that floats that we love the most. Yes, we love the boats, we're the Boat Geeks, whatever floats your boat.
Welcome to another episode of the Boat Geeks. I am your host, Darren.
And I'm your other host, Darren.
And today we are very honored and privileged to have our first guest.
Special guest.
Yes, very special guest.
Master Chief Harley Matlock, commanding officer of the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Osprey. Welcome.
Welcome,
Harley.
sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And I think we should just start off with applause. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that greatly.
Seriously, thank you for your service. The Coast Guard is one of those institutions which I think there's no argument. You guys are out there saving lives, risking your lives every day. And so when I say that we are honored to have you, we are. And thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
So we are very familiar with the Osprey, having our boats here in the Ludlow Marina. It visits every once in a while. Mm-hmm. There's been, just those occasional days where you hear the hum of your generators out there and we know you're nearby.
Yeah, that's a secure sound, right?
Yeah, it is.
You know they're there.
It's comforting to know that they're out there. And that's in our bay, our marina here, as well as just out there patrolling our waters. The goal of the Coast Guard, I don't want to say your mission statement, maybe you can correct me on this, is essentially law enforcement, search and rescue, marine environmental response, recreational boating safety enforcement, and military readiness. Does that sound correct?
That's correct.
That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of hats.
And there's also... you guys are also, you oversee navigation buoys and navigation laws and so forth.
Yes. We have a wonderful community that's called Aids to Navigation, and they're the ones that maintain all the aids out you see out here. Sort of like the unnoticed work, but they're the ones that work the hardest.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we are, we're going to get into the Coast Guard
yes,
and everything, but
Boat Geeks.
We're the boat geeks. And so we like to find out if you are a true boat geek. Do you love boats and boating? I mean, you're on a beautiful 87-foot cutter often, but what is your background in the boating world? Did you grow up
Absolutely,
boating?
I did.
Oh,
yes.
tell
hear
us
about it.
about it.
Started at a very young age. So my father actually runs a shipyard down in Texas. And so I grew up working in the shipyard.
Oh, wow.
I think I got my first boat when I was like 8 years old. It was a little pontoon boat with like a 25 horsepower. God, what was it? Like a Mariner engine on it.
Yeah.
And then I think when I was 10 or 11, we took a trip to Disney World. And I got to drive one of the little small boats that was down there in one of the lakes. And I told my dad I wanted one of those. So then he bought me one. And so, yeah,
Nice.
just grew up boating. And so joining the
Wow.
Coast Guard was sort of like the next step.
So you grew up in Texas, boating in the Gulf?
Most of my life. I grew up in Texas until I was around 12 or 13. And then we actually moved the shipyard over to Alabama. And then I spent the rest of my days in school there in Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
Nice
Okay.
little beach town.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
after I graduated high school, I went right into the Coast Guard.
Wow.
Right on.
So when you were 8 and you had that pontoon boat with the 25 horse, you must have had lots of friends because your buddies were like, all right, Harry, let's go out on your boat, man.
Surprisingly, I didn't because I don't think a lot of parents were comfortable with turning their kids loose on the waterway. But, my parents always had one rule, you have your life jacket on at all times and don't you ever take that thing off.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, but we were on the bayou, down in Southeast Texas. So I explored a lot of backwater. So it wasn't much open water stuff then, but I moved up as I got older.
So
Nice.
you were in like the swamp area, so gators
Absolutely,
and stuff like
yes.
that? Oh, wow. I was just watching a YouTuber that is down there in the swamplands, and those, what are those boats that the fan boats that
The airboats?
yeah, the airboats.
Oh, yeah.
So you had an outboard.
Just a little outboard.
Yeah, and that must have been for a little kid the biggest expression of freedom you could think of, right? You can't drive, so you don't have that freedom. It seems to me like the boat geeks that get into boats when they're young, they're latching onto that freedom thing. Like you must have just had the best time in the world going out in your boat
I was always gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you joined the Coast Guard right out of high school.
I did, yes.
So we're not going to ask you what age you are. People can do the math. So how long have you been in the Coast Guard?
It'll be 28 years, 29 years this September.
Wow.
So you're thinking about going career.
Yeah, a little bit.
What drew you to the Coast Guard? It seems like the way you're saying that you just knew what you wanted to do. What opened your eyes to the Coast Guard? What led to you joining?
I was not really that big of a fan of school, and most of my friends were looking into college, and I knew I wasn't going to pay to go get an education when I didn't like being in class. I did well in school. It just wasn't really my thing. And so my dad, I think he was kind of joking, but he's like, when you turn 18, you either need to, get a job or go to college or do something, but you're not living here anymore. And so I knew I didn't want to go to college. And so the next step was, well, why not join the military? They give you, they feed you, they tell you when you need to be up, and they give you a place to sleep. And so I started looking at all the different branches, and I talked to all the different recruiters, and I finally settled on the Coast Guard. And the recruiter actually convinced me to sign up to be a rescue swimmer. He said, you could jump out of helicopters, save people's lives, and you can also kill people too because we do military things. And I
Wow.
said, well, that's the job for me. And so I signed up and went probably 2 months after I graduated high school. I was off to boot camp.
Wow. Quick.
Very quick.
Was that any kind of culture shock at that age, or were you just prepared and ready to go and you embraced it fully?
I was so far from prepared. I didn't know. I didn't know that the Coast Guard had ships. Growing up on the water, all I saw was the helicopters and the small boats, and then they ship you off to basic training, and they're like, all right, well, now we're gonna time to pick to see where you're gonna go, and they're like, well, there's this ship here, that's this ship there. And
Wow.
I was like, no, I joined to be on helicopters because that was something different. And yeah, then they told me that school was closed because everybody was signing up to do that. So
Oh,
they're like, here's your ship. And I go, well, I love boats, so let's just see where this goes.
Yeah.
There was that movie with Costner. I think, where he was.
Yes, the Guardian.
Yes. I wonder if like, Hollywood made it so that it was popularized or something like that. And that's what made it so everybody was applying for that position or whatever. Really good movie, I guess. Maybe not from your perspective.
I enjoyed the movie, and there's some
Okay.
haters out there,
Yeah.
but I think it's good. Anything that brings us attention. I think before that, our biggest film was, I think it was the older film Navy SEALs
Yeah.
with Charlie Sheen, and
Oh.
I remember the one line where he's like, "If I wanted to be safe, I would have joined the Coast Guard." So that was like the one dig at us. So
Of
I don't
course.
know. I appreciated the movie.
Yeah.
I've never understood that whole competitive and insulting branches and all that stuff. And then you figure that the Coast Guard predates the Navy by 8 years or 9 years, right? I
Yes.
mean,
I'm very
you
interested.
got that on them.
I am very interested in the relationship between the Coast Guard and the Navy, and how that interaction goes. But before we move into, I think, the topic of the Coast Guard, I would love to know more about the Osprey, because we were talking about boats.
Such a cool boat.
And when you were looking for, what was your first assignment?
My first assignment was on the Coast Guard cutter Point Lobos out of Pensacola, Florida. That's an old 82-foot point class. They've
Right.
all been since decommissioned and replaced with the 87s.
All of them?
All of them.
Okay. Yeah, so that was the previous class that was around here as well.
And how long were you on that particular vessel?
Just under 3 years.
Okay.
And where was that?
And Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola. So what was that experience like? What was your initiation into the Coast Guard and living on a boat and being assigned?
That was one of my best experiences for, an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And right out of boot camp, they throw you on this ship and they teach you how to drive the small boat, because every cutter has a small boat that you use to do boardings and run in for supplies and things. So they're like, you're gonna drive this small boat. So I love doing that. We immediately certify you as a boarding team member. So you go to the range and you get certified on your gun, and now you're carrying a gun, you're driving boats, and then on the bridge we would stand the lookout watch, and we would be what was called the quartermaster of the watch. So you're doing the navigation of the ship, and the thing that was best about it was, you're well fed.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
here I am right out of high school, and I'm driving boats. I'm running around with guns, and I'm eating steaks and and lobster. So I
You're
loved
living the
it.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, and believe it or not, like, you're supposed to move up as your time in the Coast Guard is, and I didn't. I really enjoyed where I was at, and I actually got in trouble for not advancing.
Yes.
And I remember talking to my master chief, going, well, why would I want to advance? I stand duty on here when we're in port like once a week, and every time I do, the cook buys me whatever I want to eat. We go fishing when we're out on patrol if nothing's going on. I'm driving boats, and I'm doing stuff, so I could do this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, unfortunately, that's not how that works. You need to go do something else.
It's the old Captain Kirk predicament. He didn't want to be admiral. He wanted to be captain
That's
on his
right.
ship
Yeah.
and let me go out. So you discovered that not only did you enjoy the Coast Guard, but you love the Coast Guard. This is the life. You got everything that a 18-year-old or a young man would want. What was your biggest surprise in terms of joining the Coast Guard? Like, what did you not foresee, good or bad, that you discovered once you were out on assignment?
Well, that's a very good question.
Yeah, that is-
Harley's like, that's a,
What-
I think maybe I just didn't really fully understand, the missions that we did. Like, it all sounds nice, like, search and rescue.
On paper, yeah.
Right. But along with that comes, the heavy seas, the blowing squalls, and unfortunately sometimes the body recovery. That's kind of the less sexy part of it.
Of course.
I don't think I was fully prepared for that, but I wouldn't say you get used to it. But yeah, there's definitely some aspects of that.
that sounds hard. Yeah. What was your the range that you patrolled out of Pensacola? How far did you guys?
We covered out to 200 miles, and then pretty much most of the Gulf Coast. We normally have say patrol areas that you go where the boating concentration are. You'll follow the fishing fleet. So there's kind of like usual and custom areas, but like we've done some interesting trips as well. I know once we escorted a sailboat race to Isla Mujeres.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that was pretty interesting.
Just as a security net for for the race boats?
Right. Yeah. We basically just followed them along, kind of stuck around the middle to the back of the pack all the way to Mexico. And then we spent a week down there right across from Cozumel. And then we, kind of followed them all back.
Nice.
That sounds like an unusual assignment, but maybe a little fun, something different, right?
It was a great trip.
I bet.
What was the most, in your early years, what was the most exciting or scary or, I guess just exciting
Memorable.
thing? Yeah,
The most
memorable experience you had, whether it be like, at seas during a storm. That's what I would imagine for me would be extremely memorable and terrifying is, high waves and a smaller boat.
It's definitely the waves. The 82s were very famous for being roly-poly.
Oh, yeah.
They would move in port, and if you hung like a washer in the middle, you could watch it move. And we went out on a search and rescue case for a tanker that had sunk in heavy seas.
Yeah.
I think it was 100 miles offshore or something like that. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, are we going to die? Because this thing is just, you're standing in the window of the bridge, and I want to say it was around 20, 22 feet, height of eye for the elevation. And I remember the boat would roll over, and you would just look, and you would basically be touching the water, and you go, well, is this the time that we roll over? And after we made it back from that, it was like you have a whole new respect for the ships that you're on, and you realize, how tough they are.
Yeah.
You know your ship, like you get to know what its capabilities are.
And trust it.
Yeah.
But, they always say when people abandon ship at sea, more often than not, the boat is found and it's still floating.
Yes.
So the boat can take a lot more than the crew. That's the common phrase I think that we hear. So
Well, I hope I never have to experience that.
You never want to. And how long were you in those conditions going out to the 100-mile?
Oh gosh,
days or?
My memory is fading away from these things slowly, but it was a couple of days that we were out, because once we get out, if we don't find anything, then we have to, conduct search patterns.
Yeah.
I think almost like right away we found a life raft with no one in it and some life rings and other debris. And so and the thing is like our searches really depend on a lot of the environmental conditions as well as the water temperature. So down in the Gulf of Mexico, when the water temperature is 85, 88 degrees, there, the chance of survival is greatly increased. So we'll search longer in those types of waters.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wow.
Interesting.
So now that was a point class cutter, which is 82 feet. So talk to us about the first time you saw either the Osprey or a Marine Protector class vessel.
Yeah, the first time I saw one was actually one of my first tours up here in the Pacific Northwest. I received orders to be the executive petty officer of the Coast Guard cutter Adelie out of Port Angeles. That was in 2002, I believe. Yes. And it was a year old. Like it was like the shiny new car off the lot.
Yeah.
So, when I was on the Point Lobos, that thing was built in 1967 and I was born in 77. So it was 10 years older than me. And so then to walk onto, like when I went to the Point Lobos, we were still navigating with LORAN. And I remember upgrading the GPS and thought that was great. And then, I walked onto the Adelie and we had the newest navigation system with electronic charting and radars with ARPA functions. And it was pretty mind-blowing to see like how far we've come in, that short amount of time. Like
walking on the bridge of the Enterprise or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so just real quick, the stats. The Osprey is Marine Protector class patrol boat, 87 feet, 91 tons.
It's 91, I believe 91 long tons.
Yeah, long tons. I didn't know that term.
Yeah,
long
it's
tons.
It requires math to figure out what the actual.
We're not going to do any maths right now. 2 diesel engines, which we'll get into.
Okay.
Cruises over 25 knots.
Yes.
And a range of around 900 nautical miles, and a crew complement of 10, but that is 11 currently, right?
It's 11 now.
Yeah,
yes.
It's been adjusted. So
now I read that at 26 knots, the Osprey. I asked Lisa, my wife, last night, because when we cruise on this boat at 7 knots.
Mhm.
We burn 1.8 gallons an hour. So,
I bet you burn a little more.
so I asked Lisa, I gave her the specs of the Osprey, and I go, guess what the gallons per hour
I didn't read
fuel
that.
burn is at 26 knots? She goes, 50 gallons an hour. I'm like, try 165.
Yes.
Woo! Even her face just went, what? Wow. What kind of engines are those?
Yeah.
So we're running MTU engines. They're 8-cylinder. I think they're like 296 TEs. They're big 8-cylinder diesel MTUs, and they have 2 turbos. They're sequential turbos.
Wow.
So when we're at low speed, it's running on 1 turbo, and then as we increase up past about 1,700 RPMs, it will kick the second turbo in, and that's when it really kind of starts sucking the fuel down.
Yeah. Wow.
I think we're running right about 1,500 horsepower.
So
Well,
when,
how often do you find yourselves needing wide open throttle? I mean, I can't imagine it happens a lot in Puget Sound, but
It really depends on, I guess you could say, who the ship operator is. I'm more of a cruiser, so if you see the Osprey out, we're probably running like between 6 and 8 knots. Because
cruiser
I like to save fuel and just enjoy the ride. Other people drive a little faster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say maybe we try to keep it to less than like 10% of the time, just because of the wear and tear
Sure.
on the engines.
yeah. But it's there if you need it.
It's there if we need it, especially if we're doing like submarine escorts or things like that. You know, running on a search and rescue case, then that's when we'll turn it up. But yeah, occasionally we'll only run it full speed, maybe once or twice a patrol, just to keep everything, you know, make sure it's running right.
Yeah.
So something cool about the Osprey is that she was actually commissioned on June 19th, 1999 at the Union Wharf Pier here in Port Townsend.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So she's been in our area for a very long time. The Osprey and the Marine Protector class patrol boats are 5 feet more than your previous vessel. How much of a difference? What was it like moving from your previous boat to one of these vessels in terms of space and the difference? You already talked about the equipment, obviously a major upgrade. I'm assuming the bridge is a major upgrade.
And I read the accommodations were
a
big upgrade.
We want to know about the launch craft. We want to know everything about your boat.
I'd be happy to tell you. Yeah, I would say the biggest difference between the 87s and the 82s is that the 82s were built, I would say, using like the World War II ship mentality. The bridge was small. You just drove, and that was basically all that was up there. And then the main deck was a cabin that had 2 racks in it. So that was for the commanding officer and the engineering officer. And then down below in the galley, there was like 2 racks. One was for the cook and an extra. And then up forward, we had a 6-man berthing, and you were in like coffin racks. And you had one head for like 8 people to use. And then with the 87s, they really focused, but we had a lot of storage. So we had like a main hold, and we kept all kinds of gear. But on the 87s, they're really kind of focused on like crew habitability and mixed gender. So the bridge is nice. It's air conditioned. We have all the latest navigation equipment. The main deck, there's 2 staterooms. So they're like 2-man staterooms. There's 2 of those on the main deck. And then when you go down below, there's 2 more 2-person staterooms. And then up forward, there's a 4-person.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Okay.
The head and shower are separate. Where before it was all in like one room. So that really helps us accommodate mixed gender, which is really good. I think it's a nice step forward, but they're much more comfortable to be in. You know, we have a coffee maker that's a Keurig, a big screen TV,
Nice.
You know, and a nice place to sit down and have your meal.
Yeah.
And good meals, it sounds
Great
like.
meals. Yes. We're fed well. We're stuck out for a while. So you kind of have to keep crew morale high, and part of that is just keeping your bellies full of good food.
Of course.
Yeah. Wow.
Now you have the a regular cook on board, somebody that's your friend.
We do. Yeah. Each of our ships has one what's called a culinary specialist assigned as part of the crew.
Yeah.
And so that's what they give us, 3 meals a day underway.
Wow.
What's your favorite meal underway on the Osprey? Or
I don't think I have a favorite
And
meal.
whatever they make,
Yeah,
right?
right. Pretty much anything that's hot.
yeah.
No doubt about it. So one thing that really stands out, I feel, about the Osprey and that class vessel is the bridge. That's a 360-degree bridge, right? You can see
Yes.
everything, and pretty spacious. How many people can you have on in the bridge without feeling cramped?
You could probably have the whole crew up there.
Really?
Sometimes, like we'll have navigation briefs prior to entering port. We'll have the whole crew up. But I would say normally we're running a 2-person watch, but I would say on average there's about 4 people up there. There's seating for 4. But yeah, it's air conditioned space.
Nice.
So yeah, usually people will tend to hang out just because it's nice to look out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Nice captain's chair. Did they have a nice?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's an upgrade I need on my boat. A better chair. So what about handling? You talked about going into some rough water on your previous assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced the same type of weather in the Osprey or same class vessel? And what is the difference?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been probably in bigger seas on the Osprey than I have on the 82, and it's a little it moves a little bit. We have a pretty high. We have a really large mast on there, and not a lot of draft. I think aft we draft 5'10", and we're 3'6" or 3'8" up forward.
Oh wow!
So it's not a real deep draft.
No.
But it still rides very well. Some people will say, it's kind of rides rough, but I don't know. I think overall, I don't really have an issue. I haven't lost my knees or blown out my back yet. Since being out.
That's a good sign.
How many people in the Coast Guard deal with seasickness?
It's pretty common. I fortunately have never been seasick in my life.
Wow,
That's great. Yeah.
Great thing, unless you're the only person that's not seasick and has
Then
to
they all
stand
hate
all
you.
the watch, right? Yeah, we kind of see across the gamut. I
Yeah.
have some people that as soon as they hop on the ship and it rocks in port from being waked, they're sick. Some people will get sick and throw up once and then get back to work. It's kind of, but most people will sort of level out, or there's enough of us that are still functioning to keep the ship going.
Well, it sounds like you are meant to be at sea, man.
Now,
People
when you go out on patrol out here in Puget Sound, Strait of Juan de Fuca, what is the average length of time where you're actually out? Because that does give the person who gets a little seasick time to acclimate to the conditions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now in this area, we're running 7-day patrols, but I would say the beautiful thing about this area is if it's rough in one spot, there's somewhere else you can go. So we usually don't keep them out too long unless we have to. Like if we're out in the straits and it gets kind of bad, we can always duck back down inside the Admiralty Inlet here and, find calmer water. So it's not like we're, if you're on the Gulf Coast or the Pacific Coast where that's all you have. So I think we're pretty fortunate to be in this area.
I bet you feel that way, right? It's beautiful up here. Like you have a paradise assignment, huh?
I had no idea places like this existed.
And what year was it you came out to the Pacific Northwest?
2002 was my first tour.
Okay, that was your tour. And what were your impressions when you were out on the water and looking around? I mean, whales, mountains.
Well, I was amazed. I mean, you see it on TV and things, but to actually come out here and experience it, it was a first for me. I didn't travel a lot growing up. So to come up here, I was like, holy moly, like this is gorgeous. And I'd been trying to get back ever since. So this is actually my 3rd tour up here. And I think we're going to retire in the area. I keep saying that, but who knows?
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm glad we have you here, and hopefully we can keep you here.
Yeah.
Now,
I wanted to, real quick though, the Osprey though.
I wanted to get back to the Osprey.
Okay, because you were talking about one of the best features being the bridge.
Take it. I know what you want to talk about. Go for it.
The next feature that we think is so awesome is the ability to launch the small boat while underway.
And what is the small boat?
The small
It's
boat
not
is
that small.
That's a Zodiac. And it has a little 200 horsepower Yanmar diesel engine.
A little 200
Yeah, I know.
It's a jet drive. It runs about 35 knots, and we can launch it. We can launch it going fast, but it's pretty harrowing experience. So we try to keep it, clutch speed or under 10 knots before we launch it. But we can launch it into up to sea state 3. I want to say about 8-foot waves.
Wow.
But we try not to operate it in that if we don't have to. It's a really good boat, highly maneuverable. that is a fun boat to drive if you ever get a chance to go take a tour on it. But it's a jet drive, and it has the twin J jet. So instead of like a traditional plate, for like neutral thrust, this one actually has 2 diverters. So you can be going from full speed, and then you put the bucket down, and it just basically stops. The bow will go underwater about 5 feet, and then it pops up out of the water, going pretty fast in the stern.
Wow. I want to see that in action someday.
Yeah. That would be a great ride.
I bet that's some fun training on that boat.
It is. And you'll see usually they're wearing helmets because it can throw you around because it can turn so sharp that if you're, the crew isn't prepared, then, you can throw them over the side real quickly.
Yeah, I bet.
I read that was one of the major improvements of the Protector class over the point was that the point class had to basically come to a stop to use a crane to launch the boat. And big improvement.
Is vastly different. It used to take us about 6 people on average to launch the small boat off the 82 because you had someone working the winch. It was an electric winch, but you had to have someone manning that. Then you had to have each person on the vang lines, 2 people on your warping lines. You had a person to hook up the sea painter, and you had to be positioned just right. And now, for the 87, we basically open the stern gate, and the crew jumps in, and we pull a quick release, and away they go.
Wow.
And recovery is just about as easy. They come. That probably is, I would say, is the hardest learning curve, is because you're basically doing a controlled crash into the back of another ship.
Wow.
And it's an unnatural feeling because everything in your boat driving, world tells you shouldn't crash into something.
Of course.
But this time you're going to. So you basically ram it up in there, and the person on deck will throw a little catch line down, and then that's what catches them, and then we'll hook them up to the winch and reset them for the next launch.
Like a plane landing on an aircraft carrier, or Knight Rider pulling into the back of the pickup truck. That is extremely cool, and I knew that was going to be an awesome feature of that boat. So is there any other points on the Osprey that you'd like to brag about or talk about? I mean, it sounds like she's just a wonderful vessel, much improved over the previous class, and very comfortable and accommodating.
I love the bridge because it really makes our job easier to be able to focus on, the task at hand. But I mean, the ship can just about drive itself. We're running a ECDIS system, so we have 2 complete electronic charting systems, and everything is tied into it. The radar, the AIS, the depth sounder, the wind speed indicator. Everything is fed into it. And the autopilot has 2 different modes. It just has like a track hold. So when you're driving, and it has just a joystick, there's no traditional helm. So you can just engage the autopilot, or when you build your route, set your cross track error, and then you can hit that, engage the track follow feature, and it will take into account your wind, the current, and everything, and it will stay on track. And the only thing you really have to do is when it's time to turn, it'll beep at you. And that's so, if you're turning to starboard, you make sure you look out the window before you hit the button and
look
just
before you
turn
turn
into anyone, right? So to me, that's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine the electronics package on there.
Does the Coast Guard do tours for the public?
We do, yes.
Okay, we have to keep
we want to do a ride along someday. That is one of
we got to keep our eyes open for one of those.
I'm sure we can set that up. I know we usually give tours prior to Seafair every year over in Seattle, and I'm sure we'll be doing that again this year.
Yeah.
My our daughter, as I was mentioning, is in the Navy, and she was part of the Nimitz and the Tiger Cruise.
Okay.
We were talking about Hawaii to here at one point. She's no longer part of the Nimitz, but I was like, wow, yeah, that would be cool. I wouldn't mind doing that trip.
I've always, as I've mentioned since I was young, I've been fascinated with ships. Back then it was, it could be a ship on the water, or it could be a spaceship, Millennium Falcon or the Enterprise or whatever. But I always loved the idea of being part of a crew. And I'm wondering if that appealed to you as well. The idea of adventure, exploration, being a part of a crew, being a part of a team. And it seems to me like that would be somewhat the experience.
We're definitely a family.
Yeah.
I will say that very much, because we're such a small crew, and we're on a small ship.
Yep.
And and we're together 24/7. So
Yeah.
we really get to know a lot about each other, and we look out for each other. And that's probably one of the best things I like about the Coast Guard is we're a small service. So
Mhm.
we usually end up seeing each other again down the road. And,
No, neat.
Yeah.
So now when you're in port
Mhm.
and you're not out on patrol, what is it like for the crew in terms of, I mean, do you still stay on the vessel or
we
Shore
you go
leave.
home?
We have a normal work routine in port. Well, there's someone on the boat 24/7, and we'll have what's called the officer of the day. So if we're in port, there's at least one person that's on there making sure everything's running, the ship stays on the right side of the water. But we run like a normal, I guess you could say a work day in port, and that's where we actually are responsible for all the maintenance of the ship as well. So we have our MKs who do the engineer work. So they're changing oil, replacing filters, doing injectors replacements, engine tune-ups, doing the maintenance on all of our firefighting gear, fire extinguishers. They stay really busy, and our deck force is ever constantly chasing rust.
boy. Yeah.
We do pretty regular maintenance on the life jackets, our dry suits, our law enforcement gear. So we stay pretty busy.
Yeah, because you have to maintain a ready status 24/7 on that vessel, right?
Yes, we have different statuses. So we'll have like our patrol status when we're underway, and then sometimes we'll have a week mixed in where we're basically in what's called a recall status. And so we'll have a certain time that we might have to be underway to respond to something. And then we have what's called a maintenance period or a Charlie period. And so it's a pretty good gamut. It changes constantly.
Yeah, it's always interesting then.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So is Port Townsend home port for the Osprey?
It is, yes. And the Coast Guard has a pretty rich history in Port Townsend.
Yeah, I do want to get into that, but real quick before we get into the history of the Coast Guard in the area, what is your favorite port to be in besides Port Townsend if you're, patrolling the Puget Sound? Where do you like to hang out?
I like the San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
Hard to
See,
beat.
he's a cruiser. He's a cruiser in a cooler ship.
But we make our rounds for sure.
Yeah.
I would say that, I don't know, I enjoy them all. Sometimes going down in Elliott Bay, it gets crazy in there, but sometimes I guess the chaos is good. But yeah, we get all the way down sometimes to Olympia for some of our trips.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We'll patrol down Hood Canal. It's always, kind of nice and quiet down there, but yeah.
How many other Coast Guard ships patrol the Puget Sound area?
Quite a few. You have the Blue Shark in Everett, and then in Bellingham you have the Sea Lion and the Terrapin. There's us. Then you have in Port Angeles the Adelie, the Wahoo, the Swordfish, and the Anacapa.
I had no idea there are that many ships. So do you guys? I'm assuming you all have overlapping territories. Like if you're getting all the way down to Olympia, right? So
yes, we're actually we're assigned to District 13. Which is basically all of Washington and Oregon. So we'll patrol any of those areas, but most of the time we spend it here in Puget Sound.
Oh, right on.
And we've got the Coast Guard mooring buoy here in Port Ludlow out in the bay, and we see cutters there often, which is cool. You mentioned the San Juans. What is it? Griffin Bay?
We have a mooring buoy in Griffin Bay, Decatur.
Oh, that's what I was.
There's one in Echo Bay on Sioux
Oh,
Island.
yeah. Forgot that. Yeah, that one's cool.
There's one up in Reed Harbor. We have them pretty strategically located throughout the AOR, and there's more in the islands just because the weather up there, depending on which way the wind's blowing. Certain places are not the best to go in the time of the year. But we basically utilize those for crew rest, or sometimes it might just be that we want to stay in a particular area for the weather or something that we might be doing later on. And it just kind of keeps the wear and tear on the engines down. So we can be underway in a high state of readiness, but we're not operating the machinery and standing with multiple people on watch on the bridge. And Port Ludlow is pretty unique is that, we're pretty central in this AOR, and we can kind of shoot out of here and get to anywhere in a, let's say an equal amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
especially if you have like a good strong winter storm coming in, you'll probably see us here in Port Ludlow because we don't want to be outside and having to transit, as you know, like the weather and Admiralty Inlet on a flood, and it can be quite challenging even for us.
Yeah, yeah.
We do love our marina and our bay here in Ludlow. The history of the Coast Guard and the Navy. You said that you did some research and saw that the Coast Guard preceded the Navy by a few years.
Yeah, established in 1790, and it was the Revenue Marine, right? And then Revenue Cutter Service.
Revenue Cutter Service and the Life Saving Service.
And then the Navy wasn't even founded until 1798.
I believe so.
Something like that. So the Coast Guard predates the Navy.
Yeah, that's I did not know that at all. And I'm assuming, not assuming, I know there's, rich history, nautical history in the Pacific Northwest. And, obviously we have, Navy bases up here and submarines passing all the time. And what is the relationship between the Coast Guard and the Navy? Obviously, you all work in the same space up here. How do you guys get along, and do you do joint operations, training, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, aside from ribbing each other, I think we have a really good working relationship. Our primary role for the Navy is to support them. They actually have a Coast Guard unit specifically for the escorts that is down at Bangor. It's called the Maritime Force Protection Unit, Bangor, Washington. So you'll see them out on the water a lot. I recommend you stay clear of them. If you do see
I
them
learned
out
that
there.
quick.
Yeah. Is that where the Sea Fox is?
The Sea Fox and the Sea Devil, but those are two more 87s in the area, but they actually just departed I think 2 weeks ago, and they're moving them around over to Georgia, I believe.
Oh, wow.
But they're still, the unit's still there. They're just using different boats.
So when you see the conning tower of a Trident submarine underway, and then you've got Coast Guard escorts, is it 5,000 yards? 1,000? No, 5,000 yards is 3 miles.
it's get the hell away.
They're enforcing what's called a naval vessel protection zone, and by law, you can't come within 500 yards of it.
500
They'll
yards.
typically screen you out a little bit further, but it's the best practice, I would say, is just to stay away.
Yeah.
Because they'll probably come and say something to you.
How many?
And I would say if you're going to make a course correction to get out of the way, make it obvious and make it early.
Yeah.
Because if you take a kind of a shallow, like, oh, I'll be out of the way by the time they get here. No, they're like, you need to move, son.
Yeah.
A little quicker.
Yes.
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. I get nervous, but it's always amazing seeing a submarine move through. Now, lately there's been a lot of trending videos on YouTube and social media of people like in Yellowstone walking up and getting selfies with buffalo, and that not turning out too well for them.
Darwin Award winners.
How many people, even knowing that it's a dumb thing to do, will approach situations like that, like want to get a closer shot of the submarine conning tower or whatever? Like, how do you just deal with some ding dongs sometimes out there?
Occasionally.
Okay. Yeah.
Occasionally. I would say it's not very frequent.
Yeah.
Most people, I think,
understand.
Yeah. When you see that many, Coast Guard boats that are in the vicinity, you kind of go, I probably shouldn't go over there. So not too often.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's just someone thinking like, oh, I'm 100 yards away. That should be plenty of distance. And I'll just keep going.
They just don't know the rules.
Yeah. And the smaller, faster boats are usually the ones we worry about the most.
Of course.
So that's who we'll try to stay out of the area.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's if you don't know, you see a submarine being escorted through anywhere the Puget Sound, get the hell out of the 500 yards.
500 yards.
So a good working relationship with the Navy, and I'm assuming you do joint training and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
You see some cool Navy boats?
Are
you proud of your boat? And
I think the Coast Guard ships look a lot better than the plain gray. But yes, we've done some joint operations. I know last year on the Osprey, we actually did a big joint task force exercise up in the Straits, and we had the U.S. Navy, the Royal Canadian Navy.
Wow.
And we did some joint exercises like towing, and we did search and rescue exercises together as well. And so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Right on.
I was going to ask, you talk about staying away 500 yards.
Yep.
In those situations, but just even in the normal course of operations when you're on patrol, what can we as the recreational boaters, and during certain times of the year, there must be a lot of us out there. What can we do when you're just on patrol to make your life easier?
Yeah, this is actually a very interesting area, and that all of the waters inside Puget Sound and the Straits and Lake Washington and Lake Union and Hood Canal are all considered international waters for navigation purposes, and so that kind of makes it interesting. And we have a very large vessel traffic separation scheme. I would say the biggest issues we have is that just boats getting in the traffic lane. That's kind of always the tough spot. But I know a lot of times we're trying to go with like education. If we jump on a boat that's in the middle of a traffic lane, we'll try to make sure, hey, on your chart plotter, do you have the vessel traffic lanes actually displayed? Because I know it doesn't always by default do that.
Oh,
Right.
Huh.
So yeah, it's pretty unique, and then we'll have boats that like to fish. I think maybe down near Kingston, the fish only bite
gosh.
like right in the middle of the traffic lane.
Of course.
So we spend a lot of our time down there educating boaters, and making sure they're following Rule 10 and not impeding, vessels that are following the traffic lane. And sailboats, there's always a race going and shooting across, and you have the ferries. So we're all just trying to work together. And so that's kind of like our big focus is just education. And we're not out trying to be the strong arm of the law. But we like to start with education first, and that makes it better for everyone.
I know that the Osprey was involved in a pretty significant drug bust at one point, like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cocaine or something like that. What have you been involved in that you can talk about in terms of like a big operation or something significant on the Osprey in your time aboard?
Well, since I've been aboard the Osprey, we haven't been involved in any of that. But I mean, in my
Good.
career, I have quite a bit. There used to be a lot of drugs that were running from Canada into the U.S., and a lot of it would come through the San Juan Islands. So we focused really hard on that. But it seems kind of like, and that maybe that's starting to slow down, and we don't really know what that coincides with. Sure. But yeah, I've worked at a few different places with some pretty large amounts. Like I know when I was on the Adelie, we ran down to San Diego and we got quite a few nice drug busts down that way of stuff coming from Mexico.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been involved in anything exciting or significant up here? Or if it's been calm, then that's great. It means you're all safe.
Right. There's still some stuff going on. I would say not a whole lot that I can talk about.
Of course.
I mean, it's I would say relatively calm place.
Right. But you keep active enough to have a job, obviously.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, just the presence is a form of deterrence, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. Definitely. So what can you say in terms of your career in the Coast Guard is something that you're super proud of or hold close?
Mm-hmm.
Your years of service is enough, certainly to be proud of, but I'm just wondering if there's anything specific about the Coast Guard or your time in the Coast Guard.
Oh, there's so much to be proud of.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is fortunate for me or unfortunate for where I've been serving at, but it seems like everywhere I've been, there's usually something major that happens. I was stationed in Gulfport, Mississippi when Hurricane Katrina hit.
Oh.
The New Orleans area, so I stayed super busy during that time. Another time I was stationed in Texas and we had Hurricane Harvey that had came through with massive flooding. I don't know. I think that's always my proudest is because even if, like the waters, are too bad to have the boats out, then the people are still working out on their own time. Cause I think we like to integrate in the communities as being such a small service that we are.
Yeah.
So we're not living in barracks on bases. We just don't have it. And so we live in the community and we try to become a part of it. So to be able to help people through times like that, I think is probably some of the stuff I'm most proud of.
Great answer. I love that.
I love it too. And being part of the community, I don't know if you would know previous like commanding officers of the Osprey, but my daughter in preschool and kindergarten had classmates, and their dad was commanding officer of the Osprey, and this is going on 8 years ago or something like that. But he got stationed in Ohio. But yeah, he would just come to school plays. I mean, it was really nice to have that just normal relationship with someone in the service that you don't always see. So we appreciate that about our Coasties.
Yeah, no doubt.
And what do you guys have any thoughts on being called Coasties?
It's just, it's kind of the normal thing. I know they've messed around with a few different things. I think at one point they tried to get Guardians going, and now I think maybe it's Sentinels. And then at the end of the day, it always is, you're a Coastie. Like there's nothing derogatory about it.
No, it's said with love and respect. I mean, we're always like, oh, good, the Coasties are here.
It flows.
That's
a lot
just how
nicer.
it comes out.
Yeah.
It's part of the name of the department.
Absolutely. All right, so now being stationed up here and discovering the beautiful Pacific Northwest, a big part of the beauty up here for me is all of the wildlife. I love bald eagles. I will always stop and watch bald eagles. The sea life, the whales, the orcas, the seals, everything. Have you seen some cool wildlife out there?
Absolutely. I think that's probably my favorite part of
Yeah.
being stationed up
neat.
this way is like we're out and we're in so many different areas that we're constantly observing wildlife. I mean, there's nothing better than, cruising around here and you see a pod of orcas and come to all stop and just, stop and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And also the great thing too is like we get to be a part of protecting that.
Yes.
I know when the Aleutian Isles sunk up in the San Juans, we were running a safety zone up there to make sure that the orcas didn't get in the oil.
Yeah.
Wow.
Monitored that. We also we were working down off of Astoria, I believe it was, and there was a gray whale that was entangled in some fishing gear. And so we brought some people out to try to get it untangled. Another great thing we got to do was someone had brought a frigate bird, I believe, or an albatross that had been injured, and they rehabilitated it here locally. And then they asked us if we could bring them out offshore to release it into their natural fishing grounds where they thought it would have the best chance of survival. And so we went chugging out like 12-foot seas, like just,
delivering a bird.
Yeah. And we brought it, I want to say it was like 30 something miles offshore. And, and the lady was like, well, I'm not sure if this thing's actually able to fly because our pen, is not big enough. And so we brought him out there and we were getting ready to like maybe just put it down in the water to see if it would at least swim around a bit. And that thing immediately took off, circled twice around us, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
That must have been glorious.
Yeah. So I've always enjoyed doing that stuff. And, and that's, that just makes you feel good just to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's heaven up here, and the wildlife is a big part of that for me. My wife loves the whales. So do I. Do you do any fishing up here?
I don't fish as much as I used to. I know sometimes if we're out, then we will fish some. I know the crew does.
You fish off of the Osprey?
We can, yeah. If we have some downtime, like it's just good for morale and keeps the crew happy. But
what have you caught?
We've caught some halibut when we worked down off of Oregon. We haven't had much luck salmon fishing up here. We did a trip to Southeast Alaska, and we were really excited. We were going to try to get some big halibut up there, but I guess we missed the season and kind of we blanked out on that. But yeah, I mean, we love fishing as well. And it helps us, to identify fish. But we don't go exclusively on fishing trips. But yeah, we do get a little time here and there.
That's so cool. I could just see a cutter, Coast Guard cutter with a bunch of poles sticking out.
Well, I bet you that culinary specialist will conjure up something really great with some fresh fish, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you guys ever get like local like crabs or anything given to you or any,
No, not usually.
Yeah. Well,
No.
any of you local people,
Yeah.
come on, support your Coast Guard.
So, I mean, that raises a question to me. I mean, for years, we've seen cutters and the Osprey
Yeah.
out here at any time, put in on the buoy at any time of the day or night. And I have never gotten in the dinghy and gone out to say hi. I mean, like, wow, if you got some fresh crab, why don't you go out and, hey, do you guys want some fresh crab? Is it okay to approach?
You can approach, and it's a generous offer, but generally we try not to accept gifts just because of the ethics laws that we have to follow. There's dollar amounts and how often and who can accept it. So generally we tend to just shy away from it, but we do appreciate the offer.
Don't bring
Yeah.
crab or money or anything, but thanks. You can bring thanks.
Support
And
support
say,
the Coast
"Thanks
Guard
for
anyway."
being out there.
When I was going to college down in San Diego, I did something similar. I got a little dinghy and I was trying to approach. It wasn't a Coast Guard vessel. It was, forgot what aircraft carrier was stationed there. But I just wanted to get a closer look.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, did I make a mistake.
Yeah.
Actually, it was just somebody up on the deck with a bullhorn telling me to get the hell away. But I didn't have crab or anything like that to offer. But yeah, I would assume approaching Coast Guard cutters usually not a good move. But yeah, we are so thankful to have you here as a guest. We thank you for your time this morning and giving us your time. And then we're just thankful for the Coast Guard in general. We love our waters up here, and not only are they protected by the position, and the Puget Sound is a very protected area, but we're also protected by all you guys, and we super appreciate it. Everything that you do. So again, thank you for your service.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we go? If somebody's interested, how about that? If somebody's interested in the Coast Guard, whether it's just knowledge or potentially for a career, where should they head? Like somebody that's in the Pacific Northwest.
There's a local recruiter in Port Angeles out at the air station, and then there's also a recruiting office in Seattle. And now is a great time to join. I would say if you're interested and you love boats and you want to get out and see the world, there's definitely the potential. I've made some good trips, and we're kind of hurting right now.
Yeah.
We're short in the service, and they're offering good bonuses for certain things. I think right now they have what's called a quick ship bonus. If you can basically go at a moment's notice, you get like a $10,000 bonus. We're looking for cooks. I believe they're offering like $60,000 to join. Nurses, I think, are like around a $65,000 or $70,000 bonus to join. Certain A schools, I want to say for electronics technician and electricians, they're offering really good money just to come in. And, I think the benefits of the Coast Guard are great. We got all the same benefits as our DOD counterparts, and that we get while you're on active duty, you can get what's called tuition assistance, and that's basically to go to college. And then after you get out, you have your GI Bill or your post 9/11 college money for that. And so, it's a good time. It's a good job, great adventures.
It's something I regret not doing when I was of the age. I considered it, and for whatever reason, I made the choice not to. But if you're at all, like you said, interested in boats, you're a boat geek, and you want a life on the water. I mean, it sounds like he's a cruiser, but just also in the Coast Guard, very much have our same, mentality of cruising around, and it's the trip that's enjoyable, not the destination. Usually, unless you're in an emergency situation, then the destination is very important. But so definitely check out the Coast Guard. Obviously, there is a lot to your tasks and the types of jobs that they're looking for. So certainly an option for hopefully some of you out there. And then maybe you'll be a guest on the podcast someday. So Harley, thank you. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, if you see us, come say hello. We're usually at a fuel pier somewhere, or especially if we're at a mooring buoy. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free
that'd
to
be
come
great.
Say hi.
All right.
stay away from the bigger ones and the Navy ships, especially
Yes,
if
yes.
they're being escorted. But
Right,
yeah, other
right.
than that, like, yeah, we're pretty friendly. We like to talk. And I think during our boardings too, we like to just talk about, because we're all fishermen and,
Yeah.
you know, locals in the community. So we're always interested. And we're not the, you know, the bad guys. I think that's one of the things I've loved about us is like, well, we're just here to make sure that you're safe and
Yeah.
be around. And so, yeah, come say hi.
That's
All
what
right.
I love about
Will
the
do.
Coast Guard. It's like the fire department. You know, I just love you guys and gals. So that is that for this episode. If you want more information on the Coast Guard, the website is
USCG.mil.
Correct.
all right. Well, Master Chief Harley Matlock. It's been a great podcast. It's been a great day having you
Yeah.
here. Spring is here, so thank you for spending this beautiful day
Yeah.
in Ludlow with us. And
And we'll see you out on the water.
we'll see you out on the
Absolutely.
water.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're the boat geeks. Whatever floats your boat. We're the boat geeks. It's the boat that floats that we love the most. Yes, we love the boats. We're the boat geeks. Whatever floats your boat. Walk on the water, float on the sea, crossing the oceans between you and me. The wind in our hair, the salt on the breeze, bringing us closer, life on the sea. We're the boat geeks, whatever floats your boat. We're the boat geeks, it's the boat that floats that we love the most. Yes, we love the boats, we're the boat geeks. Whatever floats your boat. We walk on the water, float on the sea, crossing the oceans brings you to me. Feel the wind in our hair, the salt on the breeze, brings us all closer, life on the sea. We're the boat geeks, whatever floats your boat. We're the boat geeks, it's the boat that floats that we love the most. Yes, we love the boats, we're the boat geeks. Whatever floats your boat.